Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming and more Shadow of the Erdtree. This time we're back for more weird, useful, or just interesting things you might not have known about in this DLC. We've got more from the comments this time and a few interesting community finds as well. But as we've had a bit of a lore-heavy episode recently, trying to make this one more in-game mechanic focused, just to, change it up. But with that said, let's just begin. Here's one right off the bat that comes from the comments. It was the Soul Child who highlighted this simple yet effective trick to be aware of. When you're in those forges, you've got the new forge golems to deal with. And while we found out a really cool way you can trick them is by using the Crystal Darts consumable, which will force them to fight one another, or worse, their cute slime friends. The typical way to kill them is of course to attack their crystal core, located on their spine. Usually that'll mean you need to bait out an attack and then move around the back for a nice hit, maybe getting a stun and a critical, and so on. But Soul Child tells us about one very simple and yet very effective spell to counter these guys completely, and that is the Ambush Shard. This night sorcery found in the original game back in the Witchbane ruins can be used to great purpose here. The original purpose of the spell is to strike from behind, using a projectile that spawns behind the target that you pull almost into yourself. You can chain cast it for faster follow-ups as well, and it makes for the perfect punish that you can absolutely spam into the forge golems while they walk and look towards you. It only requires 23 intelligence to use and is even cheaper on FP than it used to be in the past. Also, as a night sorcery, it comes with a hidden but important passive. Night sorceries such as this projectile cannot be seen by enemy AI. That means they don't try to dodge them, making this spell much more effective and much more relevant to spam into the back of these golems. So, great tip from Soul Child there, thank you for the suggestion. Next up, just a fun one. Did you know that you can break the camera in Elden Ring? Yep, just like in the original game, there's a few places where you'd be able to break it as part of a different goal. Two good examples of that would be the inner consecrated snowfield skip or maybe the Redan desert skip. Basically, you'd throw yourself off a ledge in an intentional specific place. The idea was to fall and land in a certain spot that would then put you at, say, a Statue of Marika in a new location, unlocking an area early. I expect speedrunners are doing all kinds of methods and looking for that kind of stuff right now for the DLC, but this one's just interesting to see by comparison. Where in those examples you will break the camera, but then also die shortly after anyway, this clip shows the camera break sticking around for play. As posted on the Elden Ring Reddit by Turtles in the Sun, there's a spot you can trigger it on at those stone coffins in the Cerulean coast. The result is a forced bird's eye perspective on the game. What's great and extra weird about this is how it follows around Torrent no problem, but the moment that Turtle dismounts here, the camera begins to hold its position. So even when the player walks around, the camera no longer moves, letting the player walk off frame if you want to. Pretty random, funny, and probably terrible to have happen naturally, but to explain it somewhat, there's two levels to falling death. One part of that is the falling and dying part, and the other is when it forces the camera to this bird's eye view. This is to indicate to you that you're dead, and this fall was definitely a mistake. However, in some places the bird's eye view warning will trigger before the actual death takes place. That means if you can trigger the camera change, but then avoid the actual death trigger, you'll force the camera to go into the full camera mode, and then keep it like Turtles did here. But yeah, nice to see this mechanic come back, and an interesting way to trigger it without the death. Moving on to a slightly lore-focused one now though. Why won't Torrent show up in the Abyssal Woods? I'm sure we all remember the spooky moment when you first enter, with the messages on the ground from the devs, the way they suddenly force you to dismount from Torrent here, and then when you try to summon him again, it tells you the spectral steed is frightened and can't be summoned. It's an uncomfortable moment that definitely had me guessing, in a way that I haven't really experienced with From Software since Bloodborne, and that insane twist with the gain enough insight moment. But why is it actually that Torrent can't be used here, other than just the game mechanic? What is so scary for him? Normally you can summon him again and again. If you use a flask, if he dies, it's no problem. He's essentially an immortal spirit. Well, it's somewhat explained in that frenzied flame ending from the original game, where Torrent and his whistle fades to ash in the hands of Melina as it's been burned away, and then she swears to hunt you down. But it's actually now directly explained by an item, the new Surging Frenzied Flame. These are consumable tools. You can spend FP to send out some Frenzied Flame from a stone on a location. These apparently can drop from untouchable enemies in the forest, which if you didn't know, they can be killed. All you need to do is parry right as they're about to grab you. You'll counter the attack, leaving them exposed short to a critical, but then their protection is gone too. So maybe you'll kill some of these and get the drop, but otherwise you can find some in set spawns in the mid-romance, and there's even a cookbook there to actually craft some. In any case, let's read the description. These are spirit grave stones, burned by the frenzied flame. Spirits are eternal, and yet frenzied flame melts them away regardless. No wonder the Horn scent forbid the flame's use. So there it is. While spirits are normally eternal, like say Torrent, you can essentially burn away their very essence with frenzied flame only. Torrent must somehow know that, and knowing it, refuses to expose himself even a little when in the Abyssal Woods. Pretty cool. Next up, we have another from the comments of the series. This comes from Death Stride, who noticed a neat little detail as a quick one to highlight. You know, in the whole St. Trina related section, the Stone Coffin Fissure. Through that area you have some weird enemies, like the living slimes, and then the boss, the putrescent knight. Its remembrance tells us that all tainted flesh eventually becomes this way. Putrescence, meaning decaying or rotting matter. And while that boss essentially was a clump that imbibed St. Trina's nectar directly, the effect took root here in the plants as well, shown in the new plants, the Nectar Blood versions. A little plant that's created from the blood of St. Trina. Death Stride's little detail was about these. There's this cool moment at the Grace before the boss fight, where all the animals are shown up here, in a big group, sleeping, gathered as one and at complete peace with you and each other. When you kill them, somehow these animals can drop the Nectar Blood plants. So I don't know, were they gathering them somehow? Maybe they ate them and that's what's affected them so. My question is, how did most of these animals even make it here? But the fact that they're asleep makes me think they've drank from the blood of St. Trina or they've eaten these plants. In any case, while these plants are meant to be very rare, only really found in this section, you can farm out these poor animals en masse easily, meaning you can get the drops. Obviously, they're also going to drop normal, useful crafting materials, like for say crafting arrows and so on. So I think this might be the new best spot to farm those kind of materials. Where else can you get this many animals in one spot that don't move, that respawn at a Grace right next to them? It's honestly very useful. Finally though, lastly for today, a pretty crazy trick you can consider for Romina, one of the major bosses in the DLC. Romina clearly has an interesting hitbox. She's half giant scorpion and half centipede, but specifically on that front centipede section, it kind of curves forward and upwards, flattening out for a moment. As shown by Candy Ashes on Twitter, you can actually jump onto that spot and then get stuck. Why is that good? Well, because you're generating these incredible ticks of stagger as you bugger out completely. By just landing there and getting those ticks, you can get a full stagger, leading to a free critical, and so on. You can repeatedly jump on her in this way at the right time, in theory. Though it's certainly not an easy task. I've been trying to get some footage of it for myself, but I found it quite difficult. This might remind those of us who've been playing the games for a long while of a specific boss, Nazca, a scorpion boss of Dark Souls 2, who had a really similar bug. During the fight, she might do some tail slams, and when they go flat on the ground, you could run up the tails and onto her very flat back. That would bug her out, causing the AI to completely stop, like there's no more enemies around. With that old bug in mind, I was looking at this new one in Elden Ring in a similar way. Because we can jump onto her, could that be what's causing her to stand still like that? Because it can't find an enemy anymore. But this, by comparison, has a lot more practical effect because of the stagger build-up. Either way, if you get good at something like this, it could be very useful. And sometimes I just like bugs in these games, especially ones that are practical like this. But there you have it, a new set of weird and interesting and hopefully useful things to know about in this DLC. And if you guys have anything you think would fit in the series, whether you found it or seen it, let us know in the comments. And of course, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to drop a like. Until next time then, I've been Hollow, you've been you, and thank you for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.